Seymour Hersh, your friends reporting, but also what kind of prompted you then to speak before the UN Security Council and how that went?
Well,
you'll lose it. It'll come back.
The Russians had made a proposal for an independent investigation of the sabotage of the pipeline. And they asked Jeffrey Sachs, who's a professor at Columbia, and me to give a little briefing before the consideration, before the Security Council. The date was February 21. So I had almost no notice on this, got on a plane that morning, got there in time, and when I got there, I realized that very morning, a paper had been circulated among the members of the Security Council, and it said, we, Sweden, Denmark, and Germany, we got it covered. We're going to investigate this thing.
Oh, bullshit.
Thorough, complete investigation. We don't need anything but leave it to us. We got it covered. So, when the Russians made a plea for an independent investigation, saying, look, what's the UN Security Council for if you can't investigate independently an act of war of this kind? And the Chinese chimed in and said, you're right about that. And the Brazilians were kind of, saying, that makes some sense to us, okay? Well, what happened? Well, we briefed them on what we thought of the deal, and then that was the end of our testimony, and then there were several weeks went by. The proof is in the pudding here about what the UN Security Council has become. Just about 2 weeks ago now, the vote was taken. And when I read the press accounts, I said, 3 votes for Russia, China, Brazil. Okay. How many votes against? No votes against. 12 abstentions.
Right.
Now, it was too embarrassing to vote against an independent investigation. So the U.S., Britain, and France had all their little vassals vote. We all abstained. A new record for abstentions. 12 of them. Actually, it ties an earlier record early this year. 3 for the investigation. That's not enough when you have 12 abstentions. So what does that tell you? I'll say one more thing, and that is this business about, leave it to us, we Germans and Danes and Swedes. The Swedes went down there and investigated them. They're pretty able people. They know every inch of the bottom of the sea down there. And they came up, I was there. And people said, well, what'd you find? And the Swede said, we can't tell you.
Oh.
It's a secret. It would endanger national security. We're not even telling our own people. Okay, so that happens, a week or two after the explosion in late September of last year. So now the UN Security Council was being asked to trust the Swedes, trust the Danes, trust the Germans, and we got it all covered. We're going to do it.
Right. Yeah.
Well, it was really interesting. You mentioned that it was pretty much forecast by our president when he said, we can do this. I promise you, we can do the Nord Stream pipeline. There was a very enterprising Reuters reporter, a woman. Nevertheless, she persisted, you might say. She turns to Chancellor Scholz, who's standing at the next podium, and she says, Herr Chancellor, was halten Sie davon? Mr. Chancellor, what do you think about that? He looks like he's caught in the headlights, and then he says, we we do everything together. Together, we don't do anything of any consequence that we don't do together. Now, I've been asking my journalist friends in Germany, have you asked Chancellor Scholz when he knew, what he knew? If he said we do it together, did Biden tell him on the 7th of February that this was his plan? Or were you completely überrascht? Were you completely surprised in September when the thing blew? They're afraid to ask the question. The Germans are so subservient to the United States still, 78 years after the end of the war, that they're afraid to ask these questions. Now,
Ooh,
however,
I've got to get this
when
in.
it looks like the U.S. official documents are admitting that Ukraine is a fool's errand in every sense of the word, well, will they put pressure? That is, the Germans will sit up and say, "Now, Chancellor Scholz, you're doubling our defense expenditures, and we have no gas to heat our homes and run our industry. Do you think maybe you have a change of mind now?" Well, I've been saying the Germans will grow up for many years now. They haven't yet. I guess there's always hope.
Huh.
I don't know if there's hope. I mean, I think we're on the verge of nuclear war right now, and you have these European nations that are economically been ravaged, and they're all in for this conflict that's grinding on. And now you have Germany is much more strict with people like myself. We're speaking out against this proxy war, right? Openly. I was one of the speakers at the Rage Against the War Machine in DC a few weeks ago. In 2 weeks, I'll be in New York City. I'll be at another summit or peace summit for No More Endless Wars, and I'll be speaking there. So there's a small group of us that are speaking out without too many consequences. But in Germany, I talked to Alina Lipp, who went to the Donbass, and all she did as a journalist was simply ask some people how they felt about Russia coming there, and the people in Donbass, of course, wanted Russia to come and gave this response. It aired on German television. She had to flee Germany because she was threatened with prison.
Oh, yeah.
Her bank account was sanctioned, and her parents. And so they criminalized speech. So yeah, Germany's different, and they are quite firmly in the pocket of NATO and U.S. interests. Although this pipeline hurt their economy. So what is the logic behind some of these NATO countries being the vassals? And do you see, like you heard Macron about China backing away from Washington's kind of hawkish, pecking at China? What's your view? Do you think that Macron and others are going to start backing away now and not be such vassals, or are we just going to keep going towards the edge of this war?
Logical answer to that, Tara, is of course they should. There's a lot riding on relationships with China, economic relationships, especially for these West European countries. Mm-hmm. So it's not like they're going to have to follow every diktat that the U.S., acting through NATO usually, will tell them to do. So I think it'll be a more gradual process than I would like to see. Mm-hmm. But of course, Macron has the goal as an example to follow. Mm-hmm. There is a degree of independence in France that one does not see in Germany. And, against that, you have the Poles, who would just as soon get into a fighting war with Russia. They don't have any sense at all. So you get really a big mishmash in the EC and in Europe as a whole. And I think probably that will work to the good, because it's really hard for me to say, with these latest revelations, that the U.S. will still be able to persuade. The U.S. will still be able to do what Westmoreland was trying to do in doubling down in Vietnam, in this case, doubling down in Ukraine.
Mm-hmm. And I know you have a cold, and I so appreciate that you came on. So I don't want to hold you too much longer, but I wanted just a couple of things, just to get your final thoughts about the future for this Pentagon leaker, like what will happen to him from your view, just from knowing what you know about the CIA. And I wanted to bring in one more question from the audience. Reef, if you have something that someone wanted to ask. Yes. Now, yeah, mine can go last, and then he. Okay, you're scrolling. You have several, so when you rewatch this, Ray, you can watch all the chat. You can,
Okay.
see that.
That'll be instructive.
Yes, and then people, if you want to get a hold of Ray, you have a website. Maybe if people have questions, they can ask questions via email or something.
Yeah.
Okay.
When I do interviews like this, my son, who runs my website, really, really hits me hard if I don't mention it. And he says, Dad, RayMcGovern.com. And always add, if you don't get it. But I'm too modest to say, if you don't get it, you don't get it. So I usually leave that part off.
Good lead in for my question. They ask if you have any tips for how regular people survive this new digital oppression in the U.S. That's the question for you, Mr. Ray.
Okay, here you go. My recommendation is to not try to do this alone. You get together with 3 or 4 or 5 other people that you really trust, people you really reliable, good friends who feel pretty much the way you do about what's happening in this country. And you meet every week, just for an hour, that you make that commitment. Now, the only other requirement is that there be at least one woman in each one of these groups, because it's the women, in my experience, that have all the guts and a lot of the imagination, okay? So you meet every week. Now, it takes a while, but after a few months, you will find that ideas spring up from this collegial atmosphere that none of you would have thought of all by yourself. And then, when that happens, people support those ideas. People will question them, but once the support is ready, you can have support. And the other thing is that you also have accountability. If you say, I'm going to see AOC, or I'm going to bang on her door next week, then the following week, when you all get together, you can expect these good friends to say, how'd it go? How'd it go with AOC? And it'd be a little embarrassing if you say, oh, well, I didn't follow through on that. So you have accountability, you have support, you have a group that won't quit if you do it every week, okay? And if you have at least one woman in there, you're going to start getting really guts. You're going to have to have really good ideas. That's the way I would suggest you approach it. You're not going to change the world right away, but as Margaret Mead said, the only thing that really does change the world is this kind of small group of committed people.
Right. Well, on that note, I will let you get back to healing your cold, and I just want to say how much I appreciate you being here. Do you have any final thoughts? Just I kind of wanted to leave that, let you leave us with any final thoughts you have about what's happening right now.
I would say that this is the time to expose the lies, just as they were exposed on Vietnam when it became clear that the commander of the U.S. forces there had lied through his teeth. There was no way that the Viet Cong would have wreaked the havoc that they did in late January, early February 1968 without 500, 600,000 troops, okay? It was exposed as a liar, and yet it was pushing for 206,000 more troops, okay? Now, those kind of lies are existing today with respect to Ukraine. And, Martin Luther King Jr., whose works I virtually commit to memory, whose works I use in every course that I teach, in his letter from the Birmingham City Jail, he said this, and this is not often quoted. He said, like a boil that can never be cured unless it is opened up with all its pus-flowing ugliness to the natural medicines of air and light, so too injustice and lying must be exposed with all the friction its exposure creates, the light of human conscience and the air of national opinion, before it can be cured. So that's all our job, okay? We got to expose this stuff as distasteful. Let's follow the dictate from Dr. King, and remember the other thing he said, and this is perhaps even more important. There is such a thing as too late. It's getting to be that time.
Oh boy.
Thanks for having me on, Tara.
Oh, thank you so much. It was beautiful to have you on. And to the audience, I want to thank you so much for joining